that went on that recon that day, the one that he was supposed to go on, but they pulled him off of at the last minute, him and his platoon off of that. Everyone that went, those that had to replace him, the next group of people went out there, all of them died. And so had they not pulled off my father at that time to go to R&R, he would have been a part of that. And you say, why am I saying that? Because I'm doing something phenomenal, and I'm hoping that you will grab a hold to it and do the same thing. And I know you're saying, well, what are you doing? I decided that I wanted to have my parents write a book. That's right. I asked my parents to sit down. I found a publishing strategist. His name is Dr. Frederick Jones, my publishing strategist. And what he did, he's been working with me, working with my parents. My family came together. We made a decision that this was an investment that we wanted to make. And what we're doing is we're letting my parents, hi, Larfrida. What we're doing is we're letting my parents come together, and we're allowing him to interview them so we can get their story written. Because you know what? Listen, once your parents are gone, all those stories, the things that they did growing up, my mother, Dr. Fred was interviewing my mother just this past week. I'm learning so much about my parents. I'm learning so much about the different things that they've gone through. My mother was talking about, oh, I was a homecoming queen. She's sharing with us her story. And this is the powerful thing. Not only is Dr. Frederick Jones writing their story is being taped. So imagine this, long after my parents are gone, I will still have their voice. We're writing a book. Yes, I will have their book. But in addition to the book, I will also have their stories. And while they're talking, my parents now are 75 and 76 years old. And I am honored that I am getting an opportunity to be able to have their story written. And so you're like, why are you telling me this? Because I know I'm not the only one who's going to miss my parents' voice when they're gone. And you're thinking, well, maybe your parents have already gone on and you missed that moment. Well, you know what? What you can do is pay it forward. Now that you realize how that feels, then tell someone else, you know what, maybe you should get your parents to write the story. I remember when there were 5 generations in my family, multiple. Awesome. Yeah. And the thing about it, Natasha, thank you so much for sharing that. And this is the piece that we don't realize. As my dad is an only child, when my father dies, all those questions, yeah, you miss it. That's what I'm talking about. Once my dad passes, every story, all of that will die with him. It's going to go to the grave. I'll never know. I wouldn't have ever known that he was the first black sheriff in Greensboro, North Carolina, hired full-time at the airport. I wouldn't have known that he was one of the first blacks to be able to go to chemical warfare school. I wouldn't have known all these different awards that he's gotten. Just those stories of him and my mother sharing, my mother telling me how that she grew up and the house that she grew up on and the backyard, that was their bathroom. I was like, what? You used to go out in the backyard? I was like, is that like The Help? I was trying to figure out what is going on here. But I'm going to tell you something else that I'm seeing because they're sharing their story. They have really come alive. And I get to I get to listen to my parents because we're actually doing a phone call, and Dr. Fred is actually leading this whole book writing project. And I get to hear the life that comes back into them as they giggle and as they reminisce of the different stories that they've gone throughout their life. So you know what? I want to pay it forward. When my grandmother passed, I missed all these stories that I could have gotten from her. She was a great woman of faith. She used to talk about the miracles of God, and I'm exposed to that. I was exposed to how my father, yes, this is a true story, how my dad had cut his hand at one point, and we lived in North Carolina. My grandmother lived in Ohio. But she had such a relationship with God. And what she did was they put Sister Walker, which is my grandmother's best friend, Sister Walker had the gift of healings. And what they would do is they would put him on the speakerphone. And she would start to pray for my dad's hand. And when she would stop, every now and then she would stop and she would ask my mother, she said, Theresa, can you tell that he used to have, he was cut there? And she said, yes, I can still tell. She said, well, God's not finished. Literally, she kept praying until it closed up. And these are the type of things that we want to be able to hear, not These type of experiences don't have to die. And this is the type of stuff that I was exposed to growing up, and these stories. So I want to encourage you, whether it's a loved one, it's a grandmother, why don't you sit back with her? If you can't hire a publishing strategist like I did with Dr. Fred, well, I really shouldn't say I did, because my dad really is the one who's footing the money. But it was just a vision that I had, because I missed the fact when my grandmother passed. I missed having all those stories written down that we could reminisce and we could share them with the family. So I want to encourage you not to let your family story die. Reach out to your loved ones. And is this resonating with anyone? I haven't gotten any hearts, or I've gotten a few hearts. I know Natasha chimed in a little bit earlier, but I want to know, what are you thinking about when you think about your family story? I'm talking about not just your personal story, but have you ever sat back and talked to your parents about things that they did growing up? Do you know what they used to do as children? What were the things that they enjoyed doing? And let me hear from you. I'm curious to know. Hopefully this is going to be a dialogue. So you tell me, when they were growing up, what type of events were they involved in? I was listening to my dad share his story, and he said that initially he grew up, when he moved in with his father, he grew up in a very strict apostolic environment, and he couldn't play any sports. He couldn't go to the movies. He couldn't go to the beach. He couldn't do all of these things, because recently it was really hot outside. We were at an event. We were at a family reunion. Yes, I love the memories of Needham. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, Natasha. And it's so unfortunate that I know I'm not the only one, but when people hear something good, they hear that somebody else is doing something, we should chime in and help those people also start to think, you know what, this voice is going to be silenced at some point. So my dad, just a few weeks ago, we were at a family reunion, and he said, I very seldom wear shorts. And I said, why? And I mean, it was hot. And I said, why don't you wear shorts? Now, he's almost 76 years old. And I said, why don't you wear shorts? And he said, I just don't wear them. And I looked at him and I said, could it be that you don't wear shorts because when you grew up, you were taught that you couldn't do that, and now you got in the habit of doing that? And he said, you know what? I never thought of that. And you know, these are the types of things that later on in life, you're going to wonder why you do what you do, or your children do what they do, or maybe you have great legacy in your family, great stories in your family. Who's going to record those? Who's going to know about all those stories, those fish fries that happened? My mother talked about how when we were growing up, she would look for the children, and she lived really close to her sister. And she said there was a hole in the door, you know, like the pets come in and out of now. But she said that we had made a hole in the screen door, and her sister lived close enough, and she'd be looking for us, the kids. And she said we would have climbed through and gone next door, and we would be at my aunt's house. And so it's just all these great, rich stories, and even in your life, about how my grandmother built a home, and she was wondering if we were going to be upset to know that my grandmother, which I found out just recently, she's like, your grandmother, she was a bootlegger. I was like, what, for real? And just explaining how that during that time, her husband left her, and she was left with 5 kids, and she needed to figure out what could she do to survive. And she asked me, my mother asked me, are you embarrassed? I said, what? Are you serious? Absolutely not. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we want to do. Yes, and the kitchen was our gathering place. Absolutely. And you know what? Still, we some people wonder why now everyone congregates in the kitchen. And you know, it's a part of our history. We dialogue together in the kitchen because that's a part of our history. That's a part of our DNA. Really, for most of us as African Americans, I would definitely say that's a part of our culture, both in the kitchen and in the church. That has always been our places where we met. And so I haven't heard from any of you as you share your story, as you're talking, as you're thinking about your family. What do you think about that? Do you ever think about, you know, if your parents, when your parents pass, that story is going to be silent? Maybe some of the questions that you wanted to ask, you'll never be able to ask again. Have you thought about that? My mother was telling me that I'm part Cherokee. We always thought that my dad was the one who had the softer hair. But my dad said, it's not me, it's your mother. And we're like, really? Yeah, because your mother, she's part Cherokee. And that's why we have high cheekbones, is because that's a part of our family. And my mother is getting older now, and she can't remember everything because she's the fourth child. So a lot of things she doesn't know. Now listen at this, her older sister is still alive, but a couple of years ago, her older sister had a stroke. So she has all that knowledge in her mind, and we can't get to it. We can't get to it. And so whatever knowledge we get from the family, we're now getting it from my mother's story. Because we could do the ancestry.com and find out about our ancestors, but what we won't be able to get from those stories, and you won't be able to get from those stories, are those stories. And so I want to encourage you. I really do. I want you to really think about not allowing yourself to miss that legacy, to miss the story. Don't allow it to die. Don't allow the grave to take it. You know, reach out to someone. Reach out, if you want to do like I did, to Dr. Fred Jones, who's a publishing strategist, who's helping me write the story for my parents. We're going to include some pictures as well. But I want to make sure that in the years to come, my parents' voice will still be heard. Not only will I be able to read their story, but I'll actually be able to hear their voice because I would have recorded it. And so I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to share that with you. It's been on my mind to talk to you about that and share with you what I'm doing and how I am trying to ensure that we have a lasting legacy. You know, my dad was kind of nervous and concerned that not only the children, but the grandchildren may not read the story now. And I told him, you know what? We may not read the story, the book right now, because you're still here. But when you're gone, we're going to look back to those books. We're going to look back to hear your voice reading and listening to you talk about the house. He talked about the house that he grew up in, y'all. He talked about that. And I mean, just so with intricate details. You know, you walk in and to the right was the piano and this was, I mean, it was just amazing listening to him. And I told Dr. Fred Jones, I said, this project has added, really, I believe this, life to my parents. Years to their life, because now they're reliving those moments from years and years and years ago that they didn't know that they would be able to share. So I wanted to encourage you to do the same. Thank you so much for the hearts. I pray that you won't let it be too late, that you'll also start to think about, you know what, I want to share the story. And you know, many of the ancestry research websites are free with the library. That's powerful. And that's even more, thank you, Natasha, that's powerful. You're always so participatory, and I really appreciate that. That's what's so powerful, is that you can use Ancestry.com, and then you can also tie in those stories. We need to know what our legacy is. We need to know the things that we have gone through, what our family has gone through, and not just wait until the voices are silenced and wish that we would have, you know, done it. But go ahead and do it. When we sat down as a family to decide it, yes, you're absolutely welcome. You're absolutely welcome. When we made a decision to do this, we had to meet as a family because my dad didn't want to do it. And I'm going to tell you something happened. I hope I'm finding myself getting a little emotional. But about two months before we actually got together for the family, my dad ended up having, he wasn't feeling well at night. Now, I had already started talking to him about doing this earlier this year. So, but he wanted to wait. He wanted to wait. Yes, you can download census documents that include relative signatures. Thank you, Natasha. So he wanted to wait until we got together with the family. About 2 months before we got together with the family, my dad wasn't feeling well one night, about midnight. And he kept saying he couldn't breathe. Now, mind you, he told me he would not start on the project because he wanted buy-in from the entire family. The only problem was the family reunion wasn't going to be until June. So while he's not breathing well, they finally go to the hospital. Come to find out, my dad had 2 blood clots in his lungs. 2. This is before the story is written. This is before one word has been put on paper. And God spared his life. And when my mother told me, I began to rebuke the hand of the enemy. And I said, no, God, you put in my heart to write my parents' story. You can't take them before I can get the story. And I thank God that he lived, that they put him on medication to get rid of those two clots that was in his lungs. I had a cousin who died. He started with a clot in his legs. He was in his 30s. He died. But God spared my father. And I just said at the family reunion, do you all realize that if God would not have spared his life, the story that we now get to hear, we would have never heard. Sure, we could have gone to Ancestry.com. And yes, all that Natasha shared with us about downloading the information from the Census Bureau, we could have gotten all of that. But would we have gotten his stories, his own personal stories that was not recorded in the newspaper? Would we have been able to get that? No. So if nothing else, I want to encourage you to do it. Even if that means you've got to, in modern technology, even if that means you've got to go sit down with your loved one and turn on your cell phone and record them and send that to someone and get it transcribed. Don't you dare let that story die and you miss that legacy. So I want to thank you so much for joining and sharing with me. I know this is not usually my usual scope, but listen, I'm all about mind transformation, and you know that. I'm a transformation architect. I know I didn't introduce myself. I'm Bobette Brown, transformation architect, life coach, and personal certified trainer, and work-life professional. And listen, I'm here to help you basically go forward with momentum, go forward with clarity and confidence. I want you to move from woe is me to woo-wee. That's my goal in life, is to move forward with purpose, with clarity. And whatever area your mind needs to shift, I believe that God has put me into the kingdom for such a time as this. All of my clients, all of the clients that I work with, that's what happens when we come together. It's mindset mastery that we really focus on, because I believe that God has created me to be a change catalyst. And there are people who don't think that they can move forward. They're stuck. They're stuck in whatever. And this is an area too, you can be stuck in the fact that no one else is doing this. But you know what? You can move forward. And if I'm a voice and you decide to move forward with your family, recording your family legacy, then it will be worth it. If just one of you do it and say, I did it, because I don't want to miss out on this. So that's all for now. I'll probably be coming on a little bit later to talk to you more in the form of more of my niche audience, and just about empowerment, women empowerment, what I absolutely adore and love to do. But until then, I just want to encourage you to go forward. I want to encourage you to be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. I want you to know that to everything, there's a time and a season to every purpose. Thank you, Natasha. I want to thank you for always joining in, always chiming. You're such a breath of fresh air. And I've never met you personally, but I just really adore you for what you do and what information that you provide to all of my scopes. So God bless you all. You all take care. Thank you all for joining in. Thank you for taking the time out of your Saturday to join me on the scope and listen. And hopefully, if nothing else, I pray that you just won't be a hearer of these words, but as the word of God says, that you will be a doer, and you'll make up in your mind that even if that conversation starts tonight with your loved one, with your parents, with your grandparents, that you'll do it so that you can have those stories for years and years to come. So until we talk again, God bless. Have a fantastic Saturday evening, and I'll talk to you again later. Alrighty, God bless. Bye-bye.